Hello, welcome back to the Early Bar Football Podcast, episode 3. It's a Wednesday, 11th of August. And I tell you what, we'll start off not talking about football, right? I've had the biggest dinner this evening. I'm not exaggerating, right? I had what I thought was going to be a wrap before we came on here, and I'm not exaggerating. It was a burrito the size of my arm. If you're watching this in video form, it was the size of my arm. I ate the whole thing, and now I can barely move, which is why it's glad that I just ask the questions and don't offer a lot of opinion on this podcast, because, oh my goodness, I can barely move. But enough about that. We'll move on. Today I'm joined by Chrissy, Tang, Lynchy with his debut. A little round of applause for Lynchy, everyone. Yeah. Nice little golf clap there. We haven't done that for anyone else, by the way. No little applause. He's coming on for his debut, so welcome. Barnes is here as well. No clap for him. We'll start off talking about We'll start off talking about Ander Herrera or Tolisso from Bayern Munich heading to Manchester United. Yes, and I know some people will say, "What, Ander Herrera?" Yes, Ander Herrera. Reportedly, because of Lionel Messi signing with PSG, there are up to 10 PSG players that are on the transfer list, one being Ander Herrera, meaning that he could be going back to Manchester United. Now, it must be stressed that some people are saying there's nothing to this story. There are other reports and rumours talking about Tolisso from Bayern Munich as well. Chrissy, what do you think? Ander Herrera to back to Manchester United, is that a good move?
I reckon that would be more shocking than Messi going to PSG. It's taken me a bit far in that. Would it be a good move for Manchester United? I'd say no, to be honest. I think Man United could do a lot better than Ander Herrera. And I think, he was a player of the past where, he was part of the process. Don't get me wrong, he was part of the, rebuild and whatnot that Man United are going under and that. But yeah, I if I had to pick out the two out of Herrera and Tolisso, I would probably lean more towards Tolisso rather than Herrera.
Yeah. Tang, what do you think about Ander Herrera? Because as someone that's a Manchester United fan, never had a problem with him. I used to always like him. I like the fact that he'd kick people. Him walking past the Man City badge at the Etihad and spitting on it, I think is iconic, to be honest. All that kind of stuff. I love it, but I can see that most fans that aren't Man United fans don't like him. What do you think about him possibly going back to Manchester United, or what about Tolisso as well?
I like Herrera. I think that I've always I like players that go into the dark arts a little bit, as it were. So I've always been a big fan of passion merchants such as Ander Herrera. But I'll throw another name into the mix. If PSG are selling loads of their players, Idrissa Gueye potentially, I think he'd be possibly a better fit for United. If you're looking for that sort of central midfielder that just does a job in there, so Pogba can do what he does best, I'd lean towards Idrissa Gueye if he's available, obviously.
Lynchy, because obviously this is your first time on here, what's your thoughts? Irrespective of Herrera and Tolisso, what's your thoughts about Messi to PSG? Surely it's just, even now, 24 hours removed, seeing those pictures, it still doesn't feel completely real, does it?
No, it does feel a bit surreal, but the main thought I had on it was the pressure it puts on Pochettino. I think they have to start the season really strongly. And as soon as they start the Champions League group stage, they're going to have to be blowing teams away. The fans are going to expect very high things, especially from that front three. With the caliber of signings they've made throughout the summer, Sergio Ramos, Donnarumma, they've got a really strong spine now. So I think the pressure is on Poch to prove all the doubt was wrong, especially after that Champions League loss to Liverpool in the final.
Yeah, I agree. I think I saw when it came to Messi, he did an interview, I think whenever he was doing all those interviews, and he was like, I came to PSG to win my 5th Champions League. So he's pulling it right out there. He's putting the cards on the table. That's why he went there. For me, though, it's a little bit like, I don't know, it feels very easy. Don't it? It feels very easy, and just sort of, you're playing Football Manager. Not there's an easy mode. You're playing FIFA on amateur. There's players like when you're a kid, and you play FIFA on amateur, and you win 20-0, and then you say to your family, "Look how good I am at FIFA." And then you go, "Well, yeah, but it's on amateur." You put it on semi-pro, and then you lose, and then you throw the game out the window. I'm not really sure. Let's go with that one. Barnes, Mr. Burrito. Barnes, we'll move back to Ander Herrera. Could you see him back inside of the Manchester United shirt?
I cannot see that happening, to be honest. But from a neutral perspective, I think Herrera is quite a fun player to have in the Premier League. He's, as Ting said, a master of the dark arts, loves a bit of S-housery, all that kind of stuff. I think something Ginge actually mentioned in our group chat earlier about Tolisso. He's got sort of Everton for 20 million absolute flop written all over him. So I don't think that would really be a great signing for Manchester United. I don't think Herrera would be a good signing either, just to get that in. But if I had to pick the two purely on antics and fun, I'd pick Ander Herrera.
Well, I like Barnes is that yesterday you also pointed out that Everton weren't going to do well this season.
So, I don't like Everton.
No. It was something like, oh, he's had the best transfer window. He was like, I tell you who hasn't, Everton. Today. Tolisso is a very Everton player. So it's all coming out, Barnes. You don't like Everton. We'll move on. We'll talk about the Champions League a little bit because last night was the Champions League qualifiers, and Rangers surprisingly crashed out of the Champions League in the qualifiers to Malmo. I think it was 4-2 in the end on aggregate. Obviously, this is one of the first times as well, before I move to you, Chrissy, that obviously away goals no longer are a thing, right? Which is quite interesting. I mean, what did you think? Is this indicative of where Scottish football is right now?
I mean, like I tweeted last night, early buff Chris, by the way, if you want to follow me.
Give it a follow.
It was a terrible night for Scottish football. I mean, what is it? This season's the first season in 10 years that Scotland have had two teams in the Champions League, and neither one of them have made it even into the playoff round, let alone the group stage and that. I mean, if Scotland, if they want to build up their, caliber in Europe, especially in the UEFA competitions, then they need their Celtics and Rangers qualifying, not just qualifying in the Champions League qualifiers. They need them getting into the group stage because that gives Celtic and Rangers more money. It generates more money for the Scottish Premier League and whatnot. But it puts more pressure on Celtic and Rangers as well to achieve. Those two have got to go for deep runs in the Europa League. And on the topic of the Europa League, you have to give huge credit to St Johnstone, by the way, for getting a draw against Galatasaray away from home. But then again, obviously the away goal rule doesn't count, which, to be fair, I'm a fan that the away rule, rule has gone, because I think it'll make games far more entertaining. I mean, we, as a neutral, we watch football to see goals. As much as we like a great defensive display, or in your case, a great goalkeeping display.
Thank you very much.
We want to see goals. We want to see goals when we're watching a game of football. So, yeah, I'm happy the away goal rule has been scrapped.
I mean, Tang, I recall like when we were growing up that not only were Celtic and Rangers guaranteed for the group stage, but then most of the time they would get out, wouldn't they? They'd get out till maybe like the second round or something like that. It's a bit sad, especially considering what Rangers did last season, considering what they went all last season undefeated in the league, and that went at the weekend as well. I mean, is the bubble burst for Steven Gerrard, do you think?
I don't know, maybe. I think, as you said in the past, we remember young Tony Watt when he scored against Barcelona. When they had
the most unfortunate name on the back of the shirt. If you spell out T and then his last name, which is how they had it on the back of his shirt, by the way, do some quick spelling. The worst name ever. But yes, carry on.
Yeah, I mean, they had like 0% possession of the game, if you remember. But I think, as Chrissy mentions, it's the money that they're going to lose from the Champions League. They're now in the Europa League qualifiers. Now, if they don't get in that, they're in the Conference League, which is a whole other topic. But does this mean that Rangers not getting this income? Does that mean that they're going to have to listen to offers for their players to balance the books? You've got people, like Glenn Kamara. I know Morelos has now been thinking of potentially leaving just so they can, get through the year, obviously after COVID and everything. So we could see some sort of outgoings from Rangers in the next few weeks or so on their transfer window, just because they didn't make it.
Absolutely. I mean, Lynchy, do you think it's ever a chance of Scottish football coming back to its heyday of having Celtic and Rangers legitimate? I mean, they really compete for proper Champions Leagues, but they were always involved. You know what I mean? Are we ever going to get back to that, do you think?
I think it's going to be a tough ask. I mean, the way that Rangers blew away the league last season, you would have thought if they were going to have a chance to get through to the Champions League group stage, it would have been with that team, like you said, undefeated the whole season. I think Gerrard's built quite a good squad there compared to previous teams who won the league. And for them to not even get through the qualifiers, it's going to be a hard ask for either Celtic or Rangers to get back into the group stage in the future. He's not going to do it with that team. I think he's going to find it very hard in the future too. I think it's a bit of a disappointment. It would have been, even though we're all English here, I think it would have been quite exciting to see a Champions League group qualifier game at Ibrox when fans are coming back after having been away for stadiums for so long. Like the Celtic-Barcelona game years ago. I mean, even though you're English, you don't want Celtic to win. It is exciting how good an atmosphere it is on those Champions League night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I remember watching that Celtic and Barcelona game, and even though, like you said, even if you are English, then by proxy, you maybe start supporting the other British teams, and you want to see them do relatively well. Gerrard's an English manager. You don't see many successful English managers, especially on a European stage like that. That's what you want to see. A bit of a curveball then, I suppose, Barnes, before we round off into something else. With Liverpool at one point when they were struggling last year, and there was those rumours, wasn't there, about like Klopp, or does he want to go back to Germany? Is he burnt out? Has he had enough? And there were those Gerrard rumours about maybe he would be next in line with Liverpool. Do you still think that's a possibility? I mean, not after last night's result, but could you see that in the future with Gerrard?
I don't know. It's kind of like one of those where the script has already been written, the story's already been made. A lot of us have already assumed that Gerrard will be the next Liverpool manager. But I think there should potentially be another stepping stone to go from Rangers in their current form to Liverpool. I'm not sure where that might be, but I'm not sure because Rangers blew away the SPL last season, that means Gerrard is necessarily ready to manage Liverpool. Quick thing on the sort of Rangers going out the Champions League and that kind of thing. I've got a bit of an unpopular opinion on sort of champions having to qualify through these many qualifiers. Shouldn't all champions of their respective leagues be automatically allowed in the Champions League? Why should Rangers have to qualify when they've won their league? I know you'd get some poor ties in the group stage, but I think that's more the problem with the current format of the Champions League than that's not the fault of a team like Rangers. And as Lynchy said, Champions League night at Rangers, Celtic, they're class nights, and there's no reason why they shouldn't come back. It doesn't seem fair to me they have to go through all these qualifiers. Well, the third place Premier League team, was it one game they have to? Is it none? I'm not even sure now, but yeah, it doesn't seem right to me anyway.
Yeah, and I suppose as well that obviously, like you said, all the hoops they have to go through, and after last night, I mean, Chrissy brought up that it's a really bad night for the coefficient as well. So it's not only a case of they failed last night and they're not going to be in the Champions League next season. Those hoops that we're talking about there are going to get even more and more thorough. The worse they do in the Champions League, maybe next season they have to start even earlier, go through another hoop.
That's because it just gets worse and worse.
Exactly.
Only one Scottish team gets in the Champions League,
Exactly. So yeah, and as we touched on earlier, it also hurts the other teams in Scotland because now maybe they don't get that opportunity to even be in the Europa Conference League or something like that. But then I guess on the flip side of thing, if say a Rangers is in the Europa Conference League or something like that, you would think that they would be at least more involved in going a bit further on in that competition. Maybe that's something they need. I don't know. Maybe that's the whole point of the Europa Conference League. Like Tang said, that'll probably be something to discuss later on. We'll talk about Premier League relegation predictions. I just merged those two words there. Relegation predictions. We did on the first podcast, we did a load of Premier League predictions. We spoke about top four, we spoke about dark horses, signing of the windows, all that kind of stuff. But we didn't talk about relegation predictions, I don't think. And depending on obviously who you support, this could be quite an interesting topic. So I'll start off with you, Chrissy. Who do you think is going to go down this season? And I know Ed's not here, but why is it Liverpool?
Well, in fairness to Ed, I did put Liverpool as fourth in my table, but now going on to the relegated teams again, I'm hoping my boss isn't watching this because rock bottom, I'm going Watford. I just think they're just going to have a chaotic season. It's Watford. They're bound to sack Xisco at some point, like I mentioned in the first episode. So I'd go Watford, rock bottom. Then I'd go Newcastle just because. Again, it's been a poor transfer window for them so far. I mean, there is talks about them having an offer agreed with Willock, but apparently now it's coming out that Willock ain't agreeing on the personal terms with Newcastle. So whether that's Mike Ashley, keeping money in his pockets again, not willing to pay out for Willock or whatnot, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But I think, with fans coming back in as well, obviously the Newcastle fans, they hate Mike Ashley, they hate Steve Bruce. It's just a toxic relationship. And then the team I've got in 18th, it might be a bit of a bold one, but I think Southampton. I mean, Adam Armstrong and Armando Broja, who they brought in, yesterday and the day before, they could be good signings, but I think, not having someone like Danny Ings that, will guarantee them at least 15 goals a season, it will be a huge miss for them. And another bold statement for me. I imagine if Danny Ings stays fit at Aston Villa, he will score more goals than Brozier, Armstrong, and Adams between them. And also, I think Ryan Bertrand's a big miss as well. He was their captain. Obviously, they made Ward-Prowse their captain after Bertrand wouldn't sign the new contract. But obviously, he's going to be a huge loss in the dressing room in terms of his character. And also, apparently, there's rumours that Leicester are circulating Vestergaard. So I think it's going to be a difficult season for Southampton. I'm not just trying to please my Portsmouth fans that are relatives of mine.
No, I agree. Southampton have been a weird one of that. For however many years now, they've just been slowly declining a little bit more and more every single season. I mean, towards the end of last season, they didn't win a game for ages. Like at one point, they were top, stop the count, they're top of the league, right?
Yeah.
And then they don't win for like something like 6 months. I mean, it's amazing that Hasenhüttl still has a job, to be honest with you. Yeah. I think that's because they're just a bit like, what did they give him a new contract, didn't they, as well? Maybe they can't afford to break that. I don't know. So,
well, I can see Hasenhüttl walking. He's losing all his key players and whatnot. He's trying to bring players in, but I don't think he wants to bring in players he wants to. I think he's kind of scraping around the barrel a bit, but it'd be interesting to see.
That's a guy as well. People forget when it comes to Hasenhüttl that he came second in the Bundesliga with Leipzig. I mean, it's not as if he's like a manager of a bad pedigree. So you don't want to be involved in a bottom of the table relegation scrap. I bet he thought he was coming to Southampton for this big project or whatever. So I think that's an interesting one. I think I agree with you. I think there's going to be one team relegated this season, which is going to be quite surprising if we were looking at it now. Tang, what do you think? Who do you think is going to go down this year?
I agree with Chris. I think Watford are going straight back down. They'll probably fire their manager within the first 3 games or something absurd like that. I can imagine. I can see them going through managers this season. I then think Palace will go down because they're awful. I missed the first episode where we slandered Palace. So might as well just get that back in for this episode. I think they've been sleepwalking, as you say with Southampton, sleepwalking to some sort of lower mediocrity where they're not actually doing much. They're just sort of existing. And I think Roy Hodgson was good enough for them. He was a good manager. They've obviously sacked him, got Patrick Vieira in. It could be a masterstroke, but it could also not be. And I just think that they're not going to have enough this year. And then for the last sort of spot, it's a toss-up between either Norwich, because they always go down, and Southampton again for the same reasons as Chris. But if I say Southampton, then I genuinely do believe all 3 promoted sides could stay up this year, which would be a nice thing to see, I think.
That'd be an interesting one. I mean, you are, certain periods of time, have been the number 1 fan of Timo Pukki. You've been the founder of his fan club as well. What do you think about his chances this season?
I think he's the greatest player in the world. I think
we should say this predates Norwich by a long time.
This is from FIFA 11 when I got a silver informed Timo Pukki for Schalke, and he was the greatest ever FIFA Ultimate Team player that I've ever played with. I also got a Celtic shirt when he joined Celtic, if you guys didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking like 10 years ago. This has been a 10-year thing.
Yeah, I spent £60 on a Timo Pukki shirt. It's a great shirt as well, I must add. I think, potential Ballon d'Or winner next year. Who knows? Yeah. We'll go back to his podcast, obviously, and see what happens.
Exactly. Lynchy, who do you think is going to go down this year?
So I think Watford and Norwich are pretty much nailed on. I do think the signing of Billy Gilmore on loan, it was a good one for Norwich and positive. But I think if they are to lose Todd Cantwell in the last couple of weeks, sort of lessens the impact that Gilmore will have. They're gaining one good midfielder, but then losing another, especially a creative player like Cantwell. I think it also does depend on the final few weeks of the transfer window. Say if, like Chrissy mentioned, Southampton lose James Ward-Prowse and Vestergaard, I think they'd almost be certain to go down, losing the whole of their spine of their team, Vestergaard, Ward-Prowse and Danny Ings in one transfer window. Pretty much kept them up last season, I'd say, because that second half of the season for them was dreadful. So I go for Norwich, Watford again, just because of how erratic the owners are. Like Tinger said, you don't know. They could fire their manager in the first 3 games, and they haven't proven in the past that changing managers over and over again actually works for them. I think Crystal Palace as well. I'm just a bit, as an Arsenal fan, I'm a bit worried for Vieira because his managerial track record isn't good. Like Tinger said, Paul Hodgson was really, really stable. Like, whilst he's never going to perform and get top 6, top 10 even potentially, they were pretty much certain not to go down because of his experience. Similar reason why I didn't pick Burnley. I was undecided whether to pick them or not, but I think because of the managerial experience of Sean Dyche. So I've gone for Watford, Norwich and Palace.
Interesting. Actually, as well, I wanted to pick your brain on this one before we move on to Barnes. I saw a clip earlier today of Jack Wilshere talking on TalkSport, right? And it's one of the most ludicrous statements I've ever seen in my life, right? Where, and in fairness, to give it a bit of context, it was something like, Jack, what's your outrageous statement? Or something like that. That's what the segment was called. And he looks dead in the camera. I mean, dead in the camera, like I'm looking at you right now. And he goes, whoever signs Declan Rice will win the league, or was the favourites to win the league. And Andy Goldstein's there going, you're not serious, right? You're not serious. Not because Declan Rice is not a good player, but he goes, like, because if Arsenal signed Declan Rice, they're not favourites to win the league. He went, no, I think they are. I mean, is that true, Lynchy?
I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a very good player, and I'd be more than happy to take him at Arsenal, but I don't think any one player will be able to win you the league, especially not if they go to Arsenal. I don't know what
No. But speaking of that, because we haven't actually spoke about Arsenal that much. I mean, Chrissy's a part-time fan. He goes either way. What do you reckon about Arsenal this season? What are their chances? Are they going to improve on 8th?
I think we'll be lucky to get 7th, to be honest with you. I mean, like the guy top 4 predictions the other day, Liverpool, Man United, Man City, Chelsea, and then you've got Tottenham and Leicester. And Tottenham have got way more quality in form up front even if they just keep Son. I mean, our pre-season's been dreadful. We haven't won a game. Aubameyang and Lacazette just can't score even in pre-season, let alone before the start of the season. I was happy with the start of our transfer window, but it's just gone completely quiet. We still need 3 or 4 more additions, I think. So yeah, I'm not hopeful at all.
Well, it could all be changed because Aaron Ramsdale might come in, and that's the one you really want. That's the one you really want. The relegation preventer.
The saviour of Arsenal, Aaron Ramsdale.
Yeah. The saviour of Arsenal, but not, unfortunately, the saviour of goals, because they always go in. I mean, it's ridiculous. Barnes, who do you think is going to go down this year?
So, in last place, Everton. No. I've got to say Watford. I've got to go with the lads. I had a look at Watford's squad, actually, because I was thinking last season, I had no idea who still plays them. And they've got 5 strikers, and they've got Josh King, Isaac Success, Troy Deeney, Andre Gray, and Ashley Fletcher. I'd be surprised if they score 10 goals between them with that front 5. That is really championship standard. And as the lads have said, they're so chaotic. Xisco will probably be gone in a few weeks. If he's lucky to make the start of the season. I remember was it the season before last? They sacked a manager before the season started. Yeah. So that's my 20th. 19th, I've gone Newcastle. The same reason as Chris. There's just a dark cloud just hangs over that club since, whilst Mike Ashley has been there. And I can't see anything change. It's just so negative. The fans don't like the club, what's going on. They don't like Mike Ashley, Steve Bruce. They haven't signed anyone, and they can't even get Joe Willock to sign. And even if he does sign, I can't see him being as good as he was last season. He's not going to score 8 in 8 again, is he? Surely not. No. In 17th, I've gone slightly controversial, but Lynchy did mention them. I've gone Burnley. I just think, I'm not sure if this is more out of hope because it's the most boring team to watch ever. It's completely lose, to Man City 5-0 every season, and just Burnley just can't really be doing them. But yeah. I'm not sure. If you look at their squad, they've barely signed anyone for a couple of years now. They finished 17th in the league last season, and I know a lot of people aren't a fan of XG, but their XG last season was horrific. They make barely any chances, and they scrape by in games. And eventually, your luck's going to run out. And I just think that kind of story, that arc of Sean Dyche keeping them in the Premier League, it is a good story because they shouldn't be there on budget and things like that. But I think it's just running out for them.
I mean, you do, if anything, you do feel for him because a lot of people get this impression when it comes to Sean Dyche that the Burnley of not really buying anyone or, just having hardly any money, a really tight budget and doing that. That's all by design by him. But it's not, because whenever he comes out in an interview, he's like, no, I want to buy players, but I can't. They won't give me any money. So I think the fact that he's been able to do what he's done for ages is a testament to him. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if they stayed up this season. The thing is with Burnley is they might lose their first 7 games of the season or something ridiculous like that, but then they'll win like randomly 3 games in a row, like all the way from home 1-0, like as you said earlier, housing the teams, and then that might be just enough to get them back in a fight. So I think it's a difficult one when it comes to Burnley, but I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, with Watford. And then on the flip side of things, you never know sometimes with these clubs when they come up, Watford might be like 10th at Christmas or something like that. And then they just fall off the chart completely. So it's a difficult one to predict, certainly. We'll move on and talk about Man City briefly, Phil Foden, because Phil Foden's revealed he's out for 3 to 4 weeks with a foot injury, so he's going to miss the start of the season. Now, obviously, for most teams, Chrissy, this would be like a massive deal, right? Phil Foden, unbelievable player, young talent, featured maybe not as much as people thought he would at the Euros, but still an unbelievable talent. But for City, not to rule out obviously the influence and quality of Phil Foden, but for City, realistically, is it a massive miss?
Yeah, exactly. For Man City, no, it's not a massive miss. I mean, well, they've literally just signed Jack Grealish, haven't they? So it's kind of like that Foden out, Grealish in, job sorted and that. But I mean, obviously, it is bad news for England because obviously we got the September internationals coming up, and maybe Pep might say to Southgate, "Oh, don't pick Foden and that because I want to keep him rested and that in time for the September Premier League fixtures and that." But going on to the point about Man City, no, because they can literally they've literally got other bits of the jigsaw puzzle there to fit back in. Obviously I mentioned Grealish, but obviously you got Mahrez, Bernardo Silva. You've got plenty of players that can fit in that position.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well when it comes to City, because obviously there's this sort of discussion at the moment when it comes to like Harry Kane and strikers, and even before Messi signed with PSG, there was discussion about would he go to City and all this kind of stuff. And I know a lot of people are saying, City need to have a striker. They need a striker. They need a striker. In reality, they won the league last season without playing with a striker. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, it's no guarantee, like with the whole Harry Kane stuff, that even it would probably, obviously having a Harry Kane would help them, but that City team, that City squad, I'll move to you, Tang. Like when it comes to like Phil Foden being out on City this season, realistically, like what should they be aiming for this year? Is the league enough, or do they need to be challenging for the Champions League again?
It's got to be the league, innit? Of course, especially when you spend 100 million on Jack Grealish. It's got to be the league. The Champions League, obviously now with Messi at PSG, it makes it harder, but it would actually make it sort of not less hollow, but there's an actual challenge there for City to do it. I think for United fans and for Premier League fans, it's only a matter of time before City win that Champions League. I know everyone's saying, they haven't won it yet, but they're going to at some point.
Yeah. They get an easy enough draw every year, don't they? Have you said their group stage? Oh, my goodness.
Shakhtar, Lyon, and then some random Scandinavian team in the group stage, isn't it? So
every year it'll be like Man United have got Bayern Munich or PSG. City, who are they going to get? I don't know. Lokomotiv Moscow. That travel journey. Oh God, what a nightmare. Oh God, I hate that sort of stuff. It does my head in. It's so frustrating. Lynchy, when it comes to City, because you weren't on the first podcast, do you think are they your favourites to win the league this season?
I think they have to be for the depth of squad they've got. You could pretty much, when drawing back to Foden's injury, almost like Chris said, it doesn't matter. They just have such a good squad depth where they can just bring in anyone else they want. I think the only position where they need a bit more depth is up front, a central strike. Obviously, we know they're after Kane. But any other position, if there's a player injured, they've pretty much got a ready-made replacement they can bring on. Their bench and reserves who don't even make the squad on a match day could probably challenge for at least the top 6, if not the top 4. So I think that's the only squad in the Premier League where you can truly say that, where they have a fully made replacement 11 where it wouldn't impact them too much with the style of play they have.
Absolutely. I think it's an interesting one, actually, when we talk about the striker, because obviously Aguero left to go to Barca, and that whole situation is like just fascinating right now. And I'll move to you, Barnes, with this one. When it comes to Aguero at Barca, because reportedly, and obviously we don't know if these are accurate or not, but reportedly he chooses Barca because, like most people would, they go, all right, Messi's going to be there. And obviously Argentinian connection, they're friends. He goes there, obviously Messi leaves. And then suddenly, wouldn't you know it, calf's gone, mate. Calf's gone. I'm out for 10 weeks. Do you buy it? Or do you reckon, there's rumours he might want to leave already, aren't there?
Surely that's just rumours. Although the one caveat I would put into that is, has he actually been registered by Barcelona at all? Or is this just a PR stunt saying we can't register Aguero? don't go and kick him, but you better say you're injured, mate. Otherwise, you're not going to be in the squad. We can't afford to pick you, because apparently they're still struggling to register their players. So wouldn't surprise me if it's something to do with that. But I'm sure from Aguero's perspective, you've got to be good. You go and play, I'm going to play my best mate. It's going to be great. Live out last years of football, just have a laugh with Messi, be good. Oh, Messi's leaving.
Yeah,
I mean, you'd be absolutely gutted if you're from Aguero's point of view. But having said that, there is kind of an opportunity for Aguero to extend his legacy. And saying that, with all Barcelona's players, really, that Messi has left such a gaping hole in that team that it really is a chance for someone to step up. I mean, they're still in the Champions League. They still have a chance of winning La Liga. They're Barcelona. So someone has got a chance to make a name for themselves. So, why not Aguero? Why not really stamp his mark at Barcelona and, make a name for himself? Imagine they won the Champions League out of nowhere with Aguero, century that. It could happen. Anything could happen. I doubt it, but you never know. So, Aguero should try and take that opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's so much, especially, I mean, imagine you are like a diehard Barcelona fan now. Your world just must be crumbling, completely. And you're thinking this is the end of Barcelona as we know it. Imagine you did win the league this season, or imagine first half of the season, for whatever reason, they just blow teams away. I mean, I suppose we are kind of ruling it out before it's even started, but it's certainly the whole Barca situation and narrative right now. It is kind of fascinating. I know a lot of people have said that less people are going to be watching La Liga this season because Messi's not there, which is probably true. But I think out of curiosity, people are going to be paying attention a little bit, surely, to Barcelona, of being like, just what is going to be there? Who is going to start? Who players are even going to be registered? Like you said, I think it's fascinating. Now we'll talk about Rudiger. We'll switch back to the Premier League, switch back to Chelsea, because Rudiger at Chelsea, obviously influential centre-back, reportedly is weighing up his Chelsea future. He's into the last year of his contract and is currently deciding whether he wants to re-sign or listen to offers elsewhere. Chrissy, do you rate Rudiger?
I do rate Rudiger, and I think it showed again, what I mentioned in episode 1. You could tell, obviously, he wasn't a Frank Lampard player, because let's face it, Frank Lampard didn't pick him, so you could sort of tell there must have been a bit of friction between the two. But as soon as Tuchel came in, it was almost like Tuchel must have put an arm around Rudiger's shoulder and said, "Right, I want you to be, one of my central defenders, the heartbeat of the defence." And Rudiger was one of them players that was absolutely immense in the Champions League final. And, I still do think he has a lot to offer for Chelsea in that. But obviously, if he's going into last year's contract, and obviously, let's face it, he's had a bit of a turbulent time at Chelsea. So maybe he's thinking, I'll see out this year and then maybe move back to the Bundesliga. It's certainly going to be an interesting one for him.
Yeah, I think this is just Tang. This is modern football, isn't it? We've seen it with Harry Kane, that if you've got so many years left on your contract, club doesn't have to sell you. You can't leave. Nowadays, more and more players are, even if there's money on the table, are a little bit like, I'll wait till the end and I'll make that decision, within 6 months or the last year, and then you've got the power. Realistically, if Rudiger was to leave Chelsea, where would you see him ending up? Would you see him going back to Germany?
It's an important time. What is he? 27, 28, 29? That's a really interesting, and a really important age for any sort of footballer. That's like your prime age. It's a great age. It's a great age. He's not finished at 28. No. He's definitely not. And I think
he's German.
Yeah, there you go. He's German. It's a really important. Great jokes here. We're getting a lot of jokes in. It's a really important time for a big contract. He's in his prime, arguably. Where does he go? You've obviously got the big teams that will sniff around. You've got your Bayerns, maybe Dortmund if he goes back to Germany. But you could arguably say PSG potentially. They've got all the money in the world. Who won't they sign?
Exactly. I mean, and it potentially could be a free transfer once again.
Exactly.
Because also as well, it's a good point actually that obviously, whenever you sign anywhere, you can get a signing on bonus. But and these clubs talk to these players, even though they're not meant to. These clubs talk to these players once they've got a year left on their contract of, see it out, 12 months time. They basically can say, look, instead of us giving a massive transfer fee to the club, we'll give that all to you. We'll give you all that money. Instead of paying, 30 million to Chelsea for you, we'll just give you 30 million. And they'll go, oh, great. 30 million, you kidding me? Of course I'll have that. Divide up to the agent and whoever. So I think that's an interesting one. Lynchy, do you think someone like Lukaku, obviously arriving at Chelsea, is that enough to convince someone like Rudiger to stay?
I mean, I think winning the Champions League, and like Chris said, he was a central part of the team that won that Champions League and the performance in the final itself. If you got Lukaku, who is probably a central striker who would get 25 goals in the Premier League, is one of the main things that Chelsea were missing last season. I don't know what more Chelsea would need to convince Rudiger to stay if he's unsure. I mean, like Tinger said, it's probably going to be his last big contract. He's 28. He gets a 5-year big deal he's looking for. Don't see why he wouldn't want to stay at Chelsea with the signing of Lukaku. They've got quite a good young squad. You can see they're building something under Tuchel, the way he turned it around after Lampard left. I mean, I've heard PSG and Real Madrid are the ones who are interested in him. So obviously, be able to start talking to them in January, wouldn't he, if clubs abroad. But I don't see why he wouldn't want to stay at Chelsea if they do finally get the Lukaku signing over the line.
I mean, what do you think, Barnes? Do you think he'll stick around, or is this a game of trying to get more wages, or just realistically seeing what's out there?
I imagine it's a wage related. I think Rudiger's a really good player. He's a very Premier League player for me. He's very aggressive. He slams into the tackle. I don't know if it's that period when he was, where he had that facial injury and he was wearing that mask. He just looked so imperious at the back. It was for ages. Yeah, I don't know what he did, but yeah, he must have broken his nose or something. But yeah, he's a genuinely really good Premier League centre back. So I assume it's a wage thing. I'm not sure where he'd go otherwise. I think he'd go upwards rather than downwards. I was going to say if he was mainly, waning a bit, he might go to Arsenal. That tends to be where Chelsea rejects end up these days, Chris. But
not Everton. It's not that bad.
No, he's too good for Everton. Real Madrid's a bit of a stretch. I'm not sure I think he's quite happy where he is. I think he's for that level. I think Chelsea have got quite a few good centre backs there. I think Andreas Christensen, good player. Thiago Silva, obviously, although he is ageing, so he's not going to be around for that much longer. So I'd be surprised if Rudiger wanted to leave. But you never know, personal circumstances and that kind of thing might dictate that he wants to go back to Germany or wherever. And if Real Madrid come for you, it's sort of like, it might be the dream for some players. It might be his dream to play for Real Madrid. You just never know, do you?
Yeah, I think sometimes we, as people based in England, don't really get that. For a lot of European players, even regardless of the country that they've come from, for some people, like you said, it's Madrid or Barca. That's the dream. And for us over here in England, we can't wrap our heads around that because you've got your club. That's it. Whereas for a lot of people, I mean, it was like it with Ronaldo, wasn't it? At United, that he was like, well, I've got to leave because I've always dreamt of playing for Real Madrid. So maybe that is the case with him. And I just don't know when it comes to La Liga at the moment. I think that, say if you did have dreams of playing for Barcelona, I think with the chaos that's going on there right now, you would just be like, I'm just going to stay well clear of that. And I don't know, obviously Madrid isn't as bad, but there's still there's a lot going on in La Liga at the moment with like the whole, that like sponsorship deal that no one in the league's happy. I think just before we started recording, it was something like the Spanish Football Federation have said that they don't like it. And it's chaos to the nth degree going on right now in La Liga. But we'll switch from a very negative concept of Spanish football just disintegrating. Fantasy Premier League's back. Hey, yeah. Yes. Yeah. We're going to go through some Fantasy Premier League tips. Because if you're like me, we put this in the group. This is full transparency. This is behind the scenes stuff here. We spoke about a Fantasy Premier League for the Early Bath Football podcast earlier on. And Leif, who's not on tonight, said no, because I'll do it for 3 weeks, then I won't do it anymore. And we were kind of like, that's the point. Everyone does that, right? They set up a team and then they stop doing it. And I think the best thing with fantasy football is just its consistency, right? Whoever carries on doing it from the beginning to the end usually wins. So, Chrissy, if you had to give out some fantasy Premier League tips, some players maybe to look at, who would be going in your team and who wouldn't?
So I think the main tip is to not listen to anything I say.
Oh.
I'm just joking.
Especially if you're Danny Mills.
Yeah. Yeah. No, in all seriousness, I think you got to look at. I think like main position, which might be an interesting one, is defenders for me, because you got it. I struggle with fantasy Premier League. I'm not going to lie. I struggle with fantasy Premier League because I think sometimes I play as if I'm picking a starting 11. If you know what I mean, I'm picking a starting 11 to play against another starting 11 rather than who's going to get me the most points. But I think if you look at defenders, you got to look at fullbacks because they can keep clean sheets. They can provide assists and that, and sometimes they can chip in with the odd goal. So if I had to pick, a couple of names off the top of my head, obviously Shawberto Carlos probably be the main one, to be honest, because he had a phenomenal season last season for both club and country, and it's from a neutral point of view, as much as I don't like Man United, it's great to see a player like Shaw come back from the injuries and obviously the feud with Mourinho, to see him come back and be one of the best left backs, if not the best left back in the world last season. It was just phenomenal. So I'd say Luke Shaw, maybe something like a Trent Alexander-Arnold. I was going to say Robertson, but then I remembered he's picked up a knock. So maybe even something like Tsimikas. He's had a good pre-season. I think that's how you say his name, Tsimikas, the Greek Liverpool left back. But yeah, just pick a full-back that can whip a ball in, get you a few points, hopefully get you a few clean sheets as well.
Yeah, Luke Shaw's a good one, not just because, like you said, he's Shawberto Carlos, best left back in the world, but I think he's also on corners this season for United. He got a assist against Everton. We put the ball in for Harry Maguire. So good shout when it comes to Luke Shaw. Tang, what's your fantasy Premier League tips? What do you usually go for?
I tend to avoid City players because Pep rotates a lot, as we all know. I'd probably steer towards United players again. They're with Varane as well. They're going to improve their defense. I think United are pretty decent picks. Bruno Fernandes is obviously a fantastic fantasy Premier League footballer player. One of my friends said that I shouldn't be giving out fantasy Premier League tips because I finished fourth in our league last year out of 4. So
that's still qualifying for Europe.
Exactly.
That's still top 4.
Exactly, and I think that's really good. And obviously, finally, I would say probably Timu Pukki, the future Ballon d'Or winner, or Lewis Dunk, another future Ballon d'Or winner. Very, very lucky in the Premier League to have so many potential winners of that prestigious trophy.
Yeah, that people don't know about. It's interesting. Lynchy, who would what kind of tips would you give out? What kind of players would you look for or avoid for your fantasy Premier League team?
Yeah, I always avoid centre backs and centre midfielders because you always think they're going to get a few heady goals from corners or a few long range efforts if they're a centre midfielder. But I always just go 4 wingers. Probably 4 wing backs as well. Like Chris said, they're going to get you clean sheets, the defenders, and they're going to get you assists. So they're more likely to, and the wingers are more likely to get assists and goals than deep line midfielders. I mean, I did have a quick look before the podcast, and I have to back Ben White. He's only 4.5 million on fantasy. Surprisingly, our defensive record was actually okay last season. It was scoring goals. So if I had to give one tip, cheap defender, maybe put him on your bench, Ben White, 4.5 million.
Interesting. Also, as well, Lynch, before we move on to Barnes, I mean, is there a specific formation you go with? Because I have one in mind for myself, but it'll be interested to see what you say with it as well.
Yeah, I didn't do fantasy football last season, but I think the season before that I did 3-5-2. I think because that was the season where like Sterling, I think Fernandes the second half of the season, Son, you just had so many good midfielders that season who were goal scoring, and some of them were quite cheap. So I think maybe Zaha as well. So I packed out with midfielders, as little defenders as I could get in. Yeah. 2 up front.
I think that's the trick. That's what I tend to do. There's certain players that obviously are not midfielders. Like Mo Salah is not a midfielder, but he gets listed as one, and then he scores loads of goals. That's one of the tricks there. Barnes, what is your Premier League fantasy Premier League tip? Just avoid Everton players.
that actually, apart from Luca Dean, who always gets a lot of points in fantasy football, I would say. Generally, I've actually picked Richarlison the last 2 years. I've been so consistent with him. I've believed in him, and he's done absolutely nothing. So he's not in my team this year. I'm not having him. And I can't believe Lynchy saying you picked Ben White. Why would you pick any Arsenal defenders?
He's a very smart man. Lynchy's very smart.
I wouldn't have any Arsenal defenders near my squad. They just seem to concede all the time. But I don't know. I will actually pick, though, an Arsenal player for my fantasy tips in terms of the squad. I go, no, not a defender, Bukayo Saka. He's only 6.5 million. He will play nearly every game, I would have thought, on the wing for Arsenal. I think, despite what happened at the Euros, he actually had a superb tournament, and I think he's going to bounce back from that. And I think he's going to score quite a lot of goals and get quite a lot of assists. I think he was their top assister as well last season, and he's far cheaper than most. Or he's very cheap in comparison to the rest of the midfielders. So I think Bukayo Saka's a good pick. Also, Ivan Toney up front as well. I think he scored something like 40 goals when he was at Peterborough. And he scored about 30 at Brentford in one season. He's going to score goals in the Premier League, I think. And again, he's pretty cheap at 6.5 million. So I'd go with Ivan Toney up front.
Nice. Yeah, I think fantasy Premier League is always interesting. Like I said, for me, it's always a case of just whoever's the most consistent at it and whoever remembers. Sometimes as well, and I don't know how many Friday night games there are this season. I know there's one this week. Friday night games will get you because you wait till a Saturday and you think, right, I'm going to change my fantasy team. And then it goes like, oh, locked until next week. You're like, what? Locked until next week. And then you realize there's been a game on Friday. It's like Newcastle versus Norwich. It's a 0-0 at St. James's, and it's ruined your whole weekend. And it's just, it's such a nightmare. But anyway, you can let us know about your fantasy Premier League picks in the comment section below. What a segue that is. Be sure to like and subscribe with the to the channel as well. We're now officially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. If you're listening to this, you already know that. But if you're watching on YouTube, you can listen there as well in MP3 form. So be sure to check that out as well. Look, we'll catch up with you probably tomorrow. We haven't even set this out yet that much, but probably tomorrow. Either way, we'll speak to you again very, very soon. Thanks a lot for joining us, and peace.